Well, thank you very much. And I will just start by saying thank you to the Canadian Council on Invasive Species for inviting me to speak and share some of the work of the Great Lakes Commission. Non-native Phragmites management is an issue the Commission has been directly working on for nearly 10 years. And I'm pleased to be able to represent all those that have contributed to those efforts over those years, including Heather Braun, who you will actually be hearing from later this morning. So thanks to Heather and some of our other former staff and our current staff who have really been the ones leading this work. So before I get into directly our work on Phragmites, I did want to briefly explain who the Great Lakes Commission is and why we are involved in this work. The Great Lakes Commission is an interstate compact agency, which is a type of agency unique to the United States. We were established by a compact of the 8 Great Lakes states that was signed in 1955. And that compact was given congressional consent from the US Congress in 1968. So in addition to being a US agency, we also established a declaration of partnership in 1999 with the provinces of Ontario and Quebec. So Ontario and Quebec serve as associate members through that partnership and are actively engaged in all activities of the Commission. The Commission plays an important role for the Great Lakes region, providing a forum for the states and provinces to convene, share information, and speak with a common voice on regional priorities. And just briefly, in terms of our makeup, the Commission is made up of delegations from each of those 10 states and provinces. And we are governed by a board of directors, which is 1 commissioner from each state and province. And our professional staff is based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and that is where I am joining you from today. And our staff helps carry out the Commission's work and the priorities and interests of our member states and provinces. And to get into a little bit of detail about the breadth and scope of our work, we regularly establish a strategic plan. Our last strategic plan was adopted in 2017. We are actually in the process of working on a new strategic plan, but that is not ready yet. But the plan lays out our vision for the region as well as our mission, which is focused on convening and collaborating among the states and provinces to speak with one voice for the benefit of current and future generations in the Commission. The 2 key, in addition to laying out our mission and vision, the other 2 key things that our strategic plan does is lay out the ways in which we carry out our mission and work towards our vision. And that is through our 5 core competencies, which you see here reflected on this slide, and includes things like facilitation and coordination, consensus building, and advocacy. And we apply those services and competencies across a variety of issues and priorities important to water resources in the Great Lakes Basin. So on the other half of this slide, you will see the 7 program areas. Covers a lot of ground on issues important to the regional management of the Great Lakes water resources. And I would say, as we jump into our Phragmites work this morning, you see here, and one of our key program areas is aquatic invasive species prevention and control. So Phragmites, our work in this area falls squarely in that program area with some relationship to our coastal conservation and habitat restoration program area. So it crosses those 2 program areas. And in terms of our services and the ones listed there, nearly all of these we apply in some form to our work on Phragmites and invasive species for the Great Lakes region. So now that I've explained a bit about who we are, I want to talk a little bit more about why we are involved in Phragmites management in particular. Aquatic invasive species prevention and control, as I mentioned, has been a key focus area for the Commission and has really been a key focus area since the late 1980s when invasive zebra and quagga mussels entered the Great Lakes system. And today in the Great Lakes, there are 188 established non-native species, and Many of those species require management and control efforts that can cost us hundreds of millions of dollars annually just in the Great Lakes region to mitigate and manage the negative impacts from those species. So although, the solution to controlling non-native and invasive species may seem straightforward on the surface in terms of just trying to keep them out or removing them from our Great Lakes system, it's much more complicated than that when it comes to actually trying to do prevention or control or management. And especially when it comes to established species, our tools for control and management can be very limited and are often species specific. And so we're left with a long-term problem without widespread or universal solutions. And one of those species is Phragmites Australis, also called common reed. Phragmites is a non-native species found in the Great Lakes region. And in particular, it is a wetland grass that can quickly spread and take over a new area. And as you see from these pictures, it's not uncommon to find very mature patches of Phragmites growing over 4 meters tall. This growth happens relatively quickly since the grass dies off each winter and is resprouted from rhizomes or the extensive root network each spring. And even when Phragmites is not living or actively growing, dead stems can typically remain standing for several years, causing the patch an extremely dense area to be, it prevents other species from coming in and growing. And so before I continue too much further talking about the non-native Phragmites and invasive Phragmites, I did want to mention that there is also a native variety of Phragmites that is present in North America. It's a different subspecies. And while it looks very similar to the invasive variety, native Phragmites does not form the dense patches that I just showed you in a way that prevents other plants from growing. Usually, native Phragmites will grow alongside other plant species and is a normal, healthy part of our wetland ecosystems. So I wanted to note this for you all and let you know that as I move forward through this presentation, I will be specifically referring to the non-native invasive subspecies of Phragmites. And in the Great Lakes region, you can see here and across North America, Phragmites is widely established. And I apologize that this map is mostly focused on US wetlands. I wasn't able to find a very good detailed current distribution map, although I do know that this non-native European strain of Phragmites has been reported across Canada. Phragmites is not a new invasive species to us. It arrived on the east coast of North America in the late 1700s into the early 1800s from Europe, as I mentioned. And it was likely incidentally brought over within ballast materials in ocean-going ships. And then in some cases may have been intentionally brought over from Europe in later years. And it's important to note that given what you can see here from this map, Phragmites is not just a localized or isolated invader, but a binational problem that spans across North America. So we have this very widespread species that's well established, has been here for a long time. So why do we care so much about managing the species and actively trying to control it? And that's because of its negative impacts, which are several. And I'll talk about those impacts in 3 categories, including how Phragmites impacts our water, how it impacts our wildlife and native species, and how it actually impacts and interferes with our way of life. And so to start with water, its impacts to water, which is one of the most vital resources we have, especially in the Great Lakes region. And part of the core mission and of the Great Lakes Commission is to look at issues impacting our water resources. It's a dense, as I mentioned, it creates those dense stands where it is present in wetlands, ponds, or other small water bodies. And these sort of dense stands and where it's populated have been found to, in some cases, reduce water levels, alter flow patterns of water. And then sometimes it can even be found in less wet and more dry ecosystems. And as I mentioned, it quickly takes over an area and becomes a sort of monoculture of just invasive Phragmites and prevents other valuable native wetland plants from growing. Next up, I'll talk briefly about its impacts to our native fish and wildlife. Again, the dense stands take over habitat that is essential for many of our reptile and amphibian species. It prevents them from their normal behaviors of nesting, finding food, or accessing open water because it is so dense. And in addition, not just these larger species that we're all familiar with, like turtles or larger amphibians or birds, but the large patches also have been found to support fewer insect species that are critical food source for many of our aerial foraging birds. In addition, the patches replace critical marsh nesting bird habitat that is required by many of our waterfowl, like ducks and geese. And this is often why we see some of our natural resource agencies and conservation groups really getting engaged in Phragmites management because of the impact to our important native waterfowl. And then last grouping of impacts I wanted to cover is impacting our way of life and actually how we as humans interact with our environment. So not only are our ecological resources impacted by invasive Phragmites, but our people and our society and our property is also impacted. So dense Phragmites patches may cause inconvenience or obstructions to us, including obstructed access to recreational activities like hunting and fishing, decreased property values. There also is occasionally safety hazards associated with large Phragmites patches. A buildup of dried, dead stems can easily and quickly create a fire hazard. And when Phragmites burns, it burns very hot and quick. And so again, this is why we think about property values, shoreline values. Something you don't want is Phragmites nearby. And we also often see Phragmites growing along roadsides or right-of-ways. So not only can it be damaging to surrounding infrastructure in those cases, it can also block our sight lines and road signs and safety equipment such as fire hazards. So as we look across all these varied impacts, we recognize that invasive Phragmites impacts a wide variety of people, industries, and interests. And so for those reasons, it's become a significant management priority. And because of all these different impacts and diversity of stakeholders that it impacts, there are a diversity of people, agencies, and organizations involved in its management. And when you have so many groups working on the same problem, there isn't always coordinated and proactive communication and information sharing across those groups. And so this is an issue we started to recognize in the Great Lakes region, where we had this widespread established species with a wide variety of partners working on it and taking different approaches, but very limited coordination and communication regarding those approaches. So for those reasons, in 2012, partners from our agency, the Great Lakes Commission, worked with one of our federal agency partners in the US, the US Geological Survey, to come together and establish what is now known as the Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative. And we're fortunate to have federal funding through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative to support the Phragmites Collaborative. So established in 2012, the mission of the collaborative is to do that facilitation and facilitating communication and coordination among stakeholders across the Great Lakes region and serve as a resource center for information on Phragmites biology, management, and research. And this is all part of our broader effort to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our management efforts across the Great Lakes Basin. The Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative is made up of a couple of component parts: the Phragmites Collaborative Core Team, the Advisory Committee, and of course the broader Great Lakes Phragmites management community. Our core team is made up of those two agencies I just mentioned, our agency, the Commission, as well as the USGS. We partner to provide the backbone support and keep the Phragmites collaborative going. And then we are advised and guided by an advisory committee of many different agencies across the binational Great Lakes region who are involved in Phragmites management to help inform and guide our activities and identify priorities and needs among the Phragmites management community that the collaborative can help work on. The core team and advisory committee, as I mentioned, don't alone make up the Phragmites collaborative. The collaborative wouldn't be possible without the support and engagement from a variety of stakeholders in that broader Phragmites community. And we consider that community to be made up of anyone in the Great Lakes region who is trying to impact, either through management, research, or outreach, invasive Phragmites, or anyone who is being impacted by Phragmites. And so this is a very large and diverse network that we are trying to serve with all of our efforts. With such a broad-ranging issue and so many stakeholders that I just mentioned, we knew we needed a way to structure the collaborative that would allow us to strategically work together and towards a common goal. And so the Phragmites Collaborative uses an approach called collective impact to help guide the work that we do. And actually, if you're interested in the detail of how the Phragmites Collaborative applies the collective impact approach, the original members of our core team in 2016 published a paper that outlines how we apply the principles of collective impact to the Phragmites Collaborative. And so that is a resource that we can make available if anybody's interested. For today, I will just share that there are 5 conditions of collective impact, including a neutral backbone organization, which in the Phragmites Collaborative instance is the Great Lakes Commission. And so we anchor the work of the group and provide long-term administrative support and do all that day-to-day work to keep the collaborative effort moving forward. In addition to having that neutral backbone organization, you want to ensure that there are clear lines and mechanisms for continuous communication with the broad range of stakeholders that are involved. So without communication, it's very difficult to coordinate and improve your efforts going forward. So one of the things that the Phragmites Collaborative has done is spent a considerable time building those communication networks and lines of communication and resources to keep that communication going. In addition, a collective impact collaborative should have a common agenda, and that is the document that really defines the shared path forward for the collaborative of everybody involved. What are our goals and objectives, and what are we all working towards? And that provides the foundation for the rest of the work of the collaborative. So in order to implement that shared vision and approach and work towards it, you want to also have a shared system of measurement. So how do we track and measure and evaluate the effectiveness and our progress towards that common agenda that we've established? And then finally, of all of your collaborative members, you want to build mutually reinforcing activities. So everybody knows what their role is on this issue that you're tackling and how they can contribute to the common agenda and how their role relates to the roles of the others that are part of the collaborative, so that these efforts are aligned and everybody's, again, working towards that common agenda. So within the Phragmites Collaborative, we have met these first 3 conditions of collective impact, and we are working on these 2. We've done some evaluation of our common agenda and are continuing our efforts to build mutually enforcing activities among our collaborative membership. And so this collective impact approach really provides us with a systematic way to go from where we started with all these issues around Phragmites management. So communication barriers, lack of coordination, different gaps and obstacles to doing effective and efficient Phragmites management. It provides us a path and a mechanism to get from disorganization to larger changes that will allow us to achieve this vision that the collaborative has established. which is that Great Lakes ecosystems are not degraded by non-native Phragmites. So this is how we're thinking about collective impact and where we are trying to get with all of our efforts following this collective impact approach. And so I mentioned several times that key feature, one of the 5 essential components of collective impact is that common agenda. And so over the past few years, our Phragmites Collaborative Core Team and Advisory Committee have been working to establish this common agenda. And this agenda really is the first big step to align our regional activities and establish that shared vision for change. And that common agenda defines our intentions for the collaborative, tells us where we want to go, helps establish a shared understanding of the gaps and issues that we want to tackle around Phragmites management, and highlight the areas and strategies we're going to use to get to that vision. And this is what our common agenda looks like. So you can see up at the top there our vision, which I mentioned just a moment ago, what the collaborative is working towards, as well as 4 focus areas that will help us reach that vision, which include regional coordination and collaboration, best management and restoration planning, advancement of research and technology, and funding for Phragmites management. And in each of these focus or theme areas, we've identified a subset of member strategies that will tell us how we are going to work on these focus areas, and again, continue to work towards that shared vision going forward. So next in my presentation, I'm going to highlight a couple of these member strategies and talk a little bit about how the Phragmites Collaborative is supporting those strategies. So the first 2 I'll highlight. One is under that regional coordination and collaboration, which is maintaining a forum and network that is routinely used for sharing, discussing, and accessing new and best available information. And a second one I want to call your attention to related to that, but which actually falls under our advancement and research technology focus area, is providing a forum for researchers in particular to collaborate and communicate with managers. So I'll talk a little bit about how we are being successful in making progress on these 2 strategies through the activities of the collaborative. Our biggest resource is probably our Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative website, which is greatlakesphragmites.net. And if you have not had a chance to go there, you definitely should do that. It is a one-stop hub on all things Phragmites. It provides information on how to identify invasive Phragmites, including how to differentiate it from the native strain. It provides information on how to report new sightings of Phragmites. It provides information on best management and restoration practices that are in use across the region, and a variety of communication resources for all types of stakeholders. This is also where you can sign up, if you're not already a part of it, to join our Phragmites listserv that reaches over 750 individuals, all interested with an interest in invasive Phragmites management. And that is a great forum to ask questions, share information, connect with other stakeholders. And so this has been really one of the success stories and relates, to our member strategies in the common agenda, but also what I mentioned, one of the other 5 essential components of collective impact is providing mechanisms for continuous communication. So, the collaborative has been able to establish this network to share information and best practices surrounding Phragmites management and restoration activities through these mechanisms outlined here. In addition to that, and related to that research and connecting research to management while also providing continuous communication is through our long-running webinar series. And we have actually held a recent series where we were able to focus on student research surrounding Phragmites. And there are over 40 archived webinars available that we've held over the years on different aspects of Phragmites management. So those are archived, recorded, and available to view on our website. And so through our website that I mentioned, in addition to providing access to those webinars, we also consolidate all of the latest Phragmites research into one location. So we have a searchable research database. And to keep you up to date on the latest in research, we also send out a quarterly research roundup newsletter to share with you all the new research that is out there. So this is another key aspect of our work that we support and is helping to achieve and implement those member strategies on our common agenda. Another strategy I wanted to highlight today that the Phragmites Collaborative is actively working and making progress on is specifically related to consolidating and sharing case studies, success stories, and existing best management guidance for Phragmites management. So we do this in a couple of different ways. One way to learn about best management practices and guidance is we connect private individuals or smaller groups and local landowners with local invasive species management organizations who can provide guidance specific to their area, recommendations, and sometimes even assistance to those folks interested in Phragmites management. And so we host an interactive invasive species organization map that provides contact information for your local management agency. And we are also looking to expand. You'll see from what I'm showing today that this is primarily US focused, and we are actively working to expand this into Ontario as well. Another great resource we offer, again, on our website is a series of case studies from previous Phragmites management projects that have occurred across the Great Lakes Basin. These case studies provide insight on how Phragmites management and restoration work has occurred on a variety of levels and scales, and shares lessons learned from those experiences. And we're even working right now to update and add new case studies to this tool as well. The last member strategy that I will touch on, which will lead me to the other main portion of my presentation today, is supporting and implementing the Phragmites Adaptive Management Framework to improve understanding of the effectiveness of different management strategies. So this is really key to the other main thrust of the Commission's Great Lakes Phragmites work, which is also conducted under the umbrella of the collaborative. So the Phragmites Adaptive Management Framework, or Pamp, as we fondly refer to it, is, as I said, the marquee initiative of the collaborative. And in brief, it's an adaptive management program that helps Phragmites managers make efficient and effective management decisions. The creation and implementation of Pamp has been a joint effort between the Commission, the U.S. Geological Survey, and the University of Georgia. And similar to the Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative, we are fortunate to have funding support from the U.S. Federal Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. So if you remember back to the beginning of my presentation, I mentioned the diversity of managers and approaches happening across the Great Lakes region for invasive Phragmites. And some of the common management techniques that we've seen include herbicide applications, mechanical removals such as mowing or mulching, prescribed burns, and also hydrologic manipulations. And one thing that all of these management techniques have in common is that they're resource intensive to implement, requiring an significant investment of time, staffing, and specialized equipment. However, an herbicide, the other thing to consider is that an herbicide treatment in one location may yield different results than an herbicide treatment applied in a different location. And so the uncertainty surrounding management outcomes from these different approaches can often be frustrating and lead to wasted resources. But there has been successful Phragmites management programs in the Great Lakes region. And so we want to be able to capture when highly effective management techniques are being used, what makes them successful, and how can we share that information out to the broader management community. So for the Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative, this meant how can we better support managers and help them make effective management decisions and understand what kinds of approaches they should use for their unique situations. And so we wanted to implement something on a large scale that would help the entirety of the region. And an important outcome we identified was to reduce the trial and error approach to management that we saw occurring, where management plans were developed, implemented, and then being scrapped and rewritten regularly because folks were not achieving the results that they wanted to. So we wanted to help address this uncertainty surrounding include and look at things like site conditions and management timing, and find a way to help managers improve the efficacy and efficiency of their activities across the region. So with the help of a technical work group, we designed a platform utilizing an adaptive management framework that would allow us a way to systematically learn from management outcomes across the Great Lakes region, thus leading to reducing uncertainty around those outcomes and overall change the way we manage so that we don't have to continue down this trial and error approach. And so if we designed it, our assumption was if we designed it correctly, that this adaptive management program would allow us to improve the overall effectiveness and efficacy of Phragmites management across the region. So in 2017, we implemented the first annual cycle of the Phragmites adaptive management framework based on those concepts and principles that I just outlined. And this very simple image shows at a high level what the Phragmites adaptive management framework looks like from a participant perspective. And I will break down each of these 5 steps in slightly more detail going forward. So the first step for Pamp is to enroll. So we want our managers across the region to enroll their patches of Phragmites. And patches are simply areas which managers are intending to implement control or management activities during the subsequent year. And these patches can be any size, from 1/10 of an acre to 100 acres, and can be enrolled at any time. So once you've completed enrollment, each July, managers with enrolled patches of Phragmites will go out and do monitoring for their patches using a standard set of techniques that we provide through Pamp. So we have consistency within our program. And that gives us a starting point and helps us understand the invasion state of Phragmites within each area or management unit that is enrolled. And as part of Pamp, because we are asking folks to follow the standard set of guidelines, we also will provide a monitoring kit and training resources to help our managers collect that data in an unbiased and high quality way that can be fed into our Pamp program and then that other managers can learn from. So following the monitoring step, the Pamp program actually takes that information provided from enrollment and monitoring and implements a learning model which attempts to predict which combinations of management techniques are likely to be the most effective for that particular management unit. And this is a very complicated, this graphic does a good job of trying to simplify what our learning model does. As I am not a computer modeler, I will not attempt to tell you the details of how that model works. Instead, I will move on to the next step in the process, which is guidance. So once the model is run and those predictions are developed, that prediction about what might be the most optimal management approach for a particular unit is sent out to the managers in the form of management guidance. The guidance that is provided from Pamp doesn't provide instructions on implementation techniques, as that would limit participation, but it does provide some details on a variety of implementation techniques that participants could choose from and implement. So once our enrolled units and managers receive guidance, our participants are then go out and implement their management actions, ideally following the guidance that is provided for those management units. And each management action that is implemented, those managers then provide a report back to Pamp that documents the action that was taken and the details of how it was executed.
Just 5-minute warning.
Thanks. I am actually almost done, so that's great. And so those are the 5 key steps. And then each year, this annual cycle repeats itself. And ideally, because we have this learning model, the guidance that is produced each year improves because it's based on more data and more management actions that have occurred in previous years. So since 2017, Pamp has engaged 75 Phragmites managers who have enrolled over 250 management units across the Great Lakes region. We have representation from all 8 Great Lakes states and the province of Ontario. So that is the high-level overview of who has been engaged. Specific to this past year, our 2020 to 2021 cycle, we had 37 active managers providing information to Pamp who were managing 124 of those units. That totals 475 acres of Phragmites management. And so through this program, we've been able to engage a diversity of organizations and agencies. This figure actually shows the number of those Phragmites management units across the diversity of folks that we've been able to work with, from non-government entities to state, local, federal, provincial agencies, conservation authorities, and others who have been involved in the program. And so I will just touch on, we do also have a strategic plan for Pamp that outlines how we want to improve the program and how we are going to measure our success with Pamp over time. It's a 5-year strategic plan. It's available on our website if you want to jump into the details. And then lastly, I will just say that anyone can participate in the Great Lakes region, can participate in Pamp if you are interested. And more broadly, from the Phragmites Collaborative standpoint, while we have made a lot of progress, there is still more to do. And there are a number of steps that you can take to help the Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative make progress on our common agenda. And I've outlined them here. One is what I just mentioned, which is participating in Pamp. You can also share your Phragmites work with the Phragmites Collaborative community and engage with our networks of managers, researchers, and stakeholders through some of the resources I mentioned today. And then also you can refer to our common agenda and consider how your activities to manage Phragmites currently or could be adjusted to help align with our strategies and work with us to actually make progress and implement our common agenda and work towards that common vision where Great Lakes ecosystems are no longer degraded by invasive non-native Phragmites. So a bit of a rush there at the end, but thank you very much. We have a couple of email addresses you can reach us at. I also want to acknowledge my colleague, Samantha Tank, who is on the conference today. She is the one actually leading all the day-to-day activities of both the Phrag Collaborative and Pamp, so is able to answer all of your detailed questions. And just thank you for the opportunity to present and share all of our work.